Hello, Nancy. Are we ready?
Yes, ma'am, we can start the session. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Garg, Relationship Manager at Law Mentor. Welcome you all to today's webinar on the topic Internet Shutdown in Jammu and Kashmir Violation of Fundamental Rights. I feel honored to welcome our guest speaker of today's webinar, Advocate Ishita Sharma. Ma'am is a graduate of NLU Vishakhapatnam 2018 batch. Since then, she have been practicing commercial litigation specially at NCLT all across India, NCLAT and Delhi High Court, member Bar Council of Delhi. She have authored Ultimate Success Guide to CLAT and LLB entrance, and she is an author at Central Law Publications, Allahabad, and successfully runs an online coaching for law aspirants called CLAT Tutorials. Also, she created a huge community on social media for the same. I welcome you, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. You can proceed with the webinar.
Thank you, Nancy, for the wonderful introduction. I welcome you all for joining me today. So, today we are going to discuss about the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, the fundamental rights related to the internet shutdown, and the way ahead. This topic has been bothering all of us for a long time, especially from 5th of August last year, and has created some nuisance in some part of the countries. Today, we are going to deal specifically with the internet part and the effect of it on the fundamental rights of the citizens of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Though this topic is extremely volatile in nature, I would like to state that I am going to stick myself to the legal aspects and would not delve into any of the political, social, or emotional aspects of this area. I have structured this session in a way that it answers all your queries. But in case if you have any ones left, you can put them in your chat box. We will start with the history of the Jammu and Kashmir. How did it come into place? How did it move to Britishers? Why did Jammu and Kashmir accede to India? How did Jammu and Kashmir accede to India? And apart from that, why is there an exception of law for all the laws made in India to the laws of Jammu and Kashmir, to the state of Jammu and Kashmir? Moving down, we will discuss two case laws, that is Fahim Shireen on right to internet, and thereafter we will discuss Anuradha Bhasin, which deals with the aspects of fundamental right violation. So to start with, I'll begin with the history. Ranjit Singh was the first ruler of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. He annexed the state of Jammu and Kashmir from the local Sunni rulers and expanded. Thereafter, in 1846, the Treaty of Amritsar was signed between Raja Gulab Singh and Raja Ranjit Singh. Now, who was Gulab Singh? Gulab Singh was a Dogra ruler, and he was in very good terms with the East India Company. So the East India Company gave 75,000 Nanak Shahi dinars or Nanak Shahi rupees. I just correct myself. It gave 75,000 Nanak Shahi rupees to Mr. Gulab Singh, and Mr. Gulab Singh was then. Nancy, a lot of stuff is going on.
All the participants are requested to please switch off the videos and not to share the screen, please.
Mr. Akram Khan, if you could please do that. Thank you. So yes, Mr. Gulab Singh bought all the. Okay, so Mr. Gulab Singh bought Jammu and Kashmir for 75,000 Nanak Shahi rupees, and that's how the state of Jammu and Kashmir was annexed by the Britishers in India and became a part of the British India. Now, Gulab Singh declared himself as a ruler and went on governing it in a very wistful manner. Now, these people belong to the Dogra tribe. So, since they belong to the Dogra tribe, they were inclined towards Hindus and ruled in a little harsh manner towards Muslim. Muslims were not treated badly, but they were treated unequally. There weren't any Muslim atrocities which have been noted so far, but yes, Muslim inequalities in the reign of Dogras was definitely documented in the history. So the Gulab Singh was further succeeded by his son Ranbir Singh in 1857, who further annexed the adjacent lands, and post that Raja Hari Singh became the ruler. Since 1857 to 1947, things went well in Jammu and Kashmir. There were people of the state of Jammu and Kashmir who realized that at some point of time this place might harm them because of the atrocities, I would say, which were not exactly atrocities, but yes, there was eminent discrimination between Hindus and Muslim being the subjects of discrimination. So they were not very happy with the rule. So there were minor insurgencies within the state time and again. This went on for long. In 1947, the states of India and Pakistan decided to divide their boundaries. Once the division took place, the state of Jammu and Kashmir declared that they would remain independent and would not like to merge with any of the neighboring states. This came as a shock to both the nations because for Pakistan, why? I will explain. Number one, geographically and in a lot of other sense, that is politically, that is due to roads, the connectivities. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was very much closer to Pakistan. Okay. But culturally, it was extremely distant because the rulers were Hindu rulers. And they were not comfortable with the idea of Kashmir being a part of Pakistan. Thereafter, when we think of Kashmir being a part of India, so in the sense what Hari Singh thought then, he was not very okay with the idea of completely democratized state. So he did not want to be a part of India as well. This made him decide that he will be the only ruler and would like to remain the complete ruler of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. So before departing from India, the British India decided to safeguard its interest within Jammu and Kashmir. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was also losing onto its aid, that was the British India. So the Britishers decided to execute a standstill agreement between Jammu and Kashmir, India, and Pakistan. Now, what was this standstill agreement? The standstill agreement stated that whatever arrangements India or Pakistan has with the British government, such arrangements will remain the same, and Jammu and Kashmir shall follow the same path, and there shall be no such changes to it. The proposal of signing the standstill agreement was sent to both Pakistan as well as India. In Pakistan, it was signed immediately because they wanted to take the state of Jammu and Kashmir in their confidence and wanted Jammu and Kashmir to be a part of Pakistan. But in India, the then Prime Minister did not find it viable to sign it and asked for negotiations with Raja Hari Singh. Raja Hari Singh did not take it very seriously, or I really. Raja Hari Singh could not understand the intensity of the matter and did not go to negotiate with the then government in India. So the the standstill agreement with India always remained in a limbo. Moving forward, now the Dogras, who were the subjects of the East India Company, since the East India Company had given them a lot of money and made them the rulers effectively, they were having a fist hands on the Muslims. They had differential treatment, there were biases, leading to inequality, which was very evident. So there were multiple uprisings in 1865, 1924, and 1931, which was the major one. In 1931, a major anti-establishment intent was instilled by a society and which caused a lot of unrest within the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Mr. Sheikh Abdullah was the one convener of the society, and he was later on arrested. for instilling such anti-establishment sentiment. There was huge political pressure from all across the neighboring countries to release Mr. Sheikh Abdullah, but Hari Singh did not agree to it. Now, this has been the advent of Jammu and Kashmir from inception till how did it go to Britishers and what initially started the turbulence in the state. Moving forward, let's see how did the accession into India took place. So we will deal it in two aspects. There were political events which led to the accession, and thereafter there were military events which led to the accession. So the first political event was that Raja Hari Singh lost his major confidant, that was the British India government, which was leaving due to partition. And they were not in the original position like they were before, and they felt little helpless. Second was that the Hari Singh was not able to monitor the volatile boundaries of Kashmir. And so he was looking for ways to how to curb it or reduce the nuisance going on in the state. Third was, as I told you, a lot of pressure on the Raja from international forces to release Sheikh Abdullah, which he was not ready to. Because again, if Sheikh Abdullah would have been back to the normal life in the state, he would have caused unrest. Third, that the standstill agreement in India was still in limbo, and the pressure from both the countries to accede with them kept on increasing day by day. These were some political events which always played the background for the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India. Now let's move on to military events. The first major military event that took place was when around 60,000 ex-army men initiated a revolt regarding a no taxation movement, which is very fine. They can absolutely do it. But this no taxation movement revolt took a sectionist view when these 60,000 ex-army men started raising the flag of Pakistan. This was the moment when the state of Jammu and Kashmir was in a state of misery. So when these were basically the Muslims belonging to the Pooch area of Jammu and Kashmir, because Pooch was one of the mostly dominant in Muslim population, and so major atrocities towards Muslim had been done in that area. Further, after this event, there was huge unrest. The commander of Jammu and Kashmir pointed out to Pakistan that such activities are going on through your aid and you should stop them immediately. On the other hand, what Pakistan did was, instead of accepting such mistake or deliberate act, what Pakistan did was it pointed out the atrocities towards Muslims done in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which is also very legitimate. But that was not the problem to the solution. Further, this outburst worsened the relations between Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan. Till now, Pakistan believed that the state of Jammu and Kashmir will definitely accede to Pakistan because Pakistan had signed the standstill agreement, which India did not. But after this event, the state of Jammu and Kashmir had faced a lot of unrest, and Pakistan realized that they might go. The state of Jammu and Kashmir might like to accede to India because what they have done. So in 1997, 22nd October, what Pakistan finally decided was to launch an Operation Gulmarg. This Operation Gulmarg was the turning point for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, what happened in Operation Gulmarg? So here, 2,000 tribal men, as they call it, they stampeded, or they came on foot, and some came on buses to the place called Muzaffarabad, completely backed by Pakistani army chief, fully armed with modern weapons. They reached that place, and they, without seeing any humanitarian grounds, they caused as much atrocities as they could. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was not at all prepared for any such activities, and they had never thought that Pakistan, being a neighboring country and a well-wisher, would do such an activity. So it took the state of Jammu and Kashmir in a state of shock, and they could not retaliate. It was at this time that the then Prime Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, on 25th of October, told to its people that today either we might surrender to to the state of Pakistan or seek help from India. This was the time when Raja Hari Singh realized that they cannot sustain the wrath of this attack and they need help. So Sheikh Abdullah had good relations with Mr. Nehru and he sought for help. High level meeting was conducted. People discussions went on, and it was decided mutually that the Indian Dominion would help the state of Jammu and Kashmir. But before that, Lord Mountbatten objected and told that the state of Jammu and Kashmir has yet not acceded to India, and without formally converting the Treaty of Accession, or as they call the Instrument of Accession, it would look like an India-Pakistan war. It would look like an India-Pakistan war. So, Lord Mountbatten tried to convince them that we should not directly send them aid or arms without any formal treaty. So it was then that the Foreign Affairs Secretary was asked to go and view the land of Jammu and Kashmir, and to bring back the ground report as to what is going on, what is the need of the hour, how much time do we have. His name was, I think, Mr. Menon. He went to the place, surveyed the situation, came back to India, and told that urgent need of arms and ammunition is needed so that at least the people, the locals of the Jammu and Kashmir, can raise up some resistance to what is happening to them from the state of Pakistan. It was only agreed on the terms and conditions that once the situation is settled, the situation of unrest in Jammu and Kashmir is settled, plebiscite will be conducted, referendum will be made, and the instrument of annexation will be concluded. So yes, right after that, for the purpose of deploying military in Jammu and Kashmir, on 25th October or 26th or 27th, the date of signing of instrument of accession is yet not clear. Was signed between Raja Hari Singh and the Dominion of India, and officially Jammu and Kashmir had acceded to India. Right after the signing of this document, Sikh troops were deployed into Kashmir, and a robust attack or defense was showed up from the side of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is how, under these political and military scenarios, the Jammu and Kashmir became part of our nation, which is definitely our nation now. So now let us look into the clauses of the instrument of accession. So the instrument of accession had total 9 clauses. It starts from clause 4, where it said the Maharaja has declared the accession of the state to India. The clause 5 declared that terms of the instrument were invariable and cannot be changed by amending any law, act, etc., without the acceptance of the Jammu and Kashmir legislature by a supplementary instrument. The clause 6 further went on to say the Union of India didn't have any power to make laws in the state in terms of land acquisition, and also specifically mentioned the Union could not purchase land in Jammu and Kashmir unless the law demanded so. Further, clause 7 stated that the Maharaja didn't have to accept the future Indian constitution and the government of India could not force the Maharaja to do so. Clause 8 further went on to say that in clear terms, nothing in this instrument affects the sovereignty of Maharaja, while clause 9 made it explicitly clear that he was signing that document on behalf of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and therefore he is the representative of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and India recognizes him as one. So under these circumstances, the state of Jammu and Kashmir was annexed to India. So this instrument of accession solves one major doubt, which is why every law which is formulated in India has an exception to the state of Jammu and Kashmir because the Treaty of Accession signed then made it abundantly clear that India would not investigate or not bother into all the issues of the state of Jammu and Kashmir except the issues relating to military issues, foreign affairs, and communications. These were the three issues on which India was allowed to propagate and make laws. Apart from that, nothing more was within the ambit of the state of India or the Union of India. Sorry. This is the robust history of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. That's how we have become a part of it. It has become a part of our nation. Moving forward, the Jammu and Kashmir was acceded to India, but the unrest could not ever sabotage. It has always remained. There have been multiple groups, internal groups, countries within bordering nations, especially Pakistan, who always thinks that the existence of Pakistan is incomplete without Jammu and Kashmir being part of it. They think that it is not politically and economically viable for them to exist without Jammu and Kashmir being their part. So the tussle is still on. This has been eminent for all of us since inception. Moving forward, with accession in India, a special status to Jammu and Kashmir was granted by Presidential Order of 1954. This presidential order gave another article to the within the Constitution of India, which is Article 35A. Article 35A talks about special privileges to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. These privileges relate to number one, land. That the people of the Jammu and Kashmir shall only buy land and the outsiders are restrained from doing so. If at all the government of India needs any land, Raja Hari Singh would buy it for them and give it to them. Number two is regarding jobs. That the people of Jammu and Kashmir will only get the government jobs in that state. Number three relates to aid and scholarships. So these are the four advantages which the people of Jammu and Kashmir had by virtue of Article 35A. Whereas Article 370 in the Indian Constitution gave a special status to Jammu and Kashmir with regard to formulation of laws. Earlier it was restricted, but by virtue of Article 370, the court went on to say, the article went on to say that it could make laws regarding Jammu and Kashmir beyond those three things with respect to only concurrent list and union list, but shall not interfere with the state list of Jammu and Kashmir. So these are the two articles which play a dominant role. And recently, by virtue of Article 373, the special status of Jammu and Kashmir has been abrogated and it has now become a part of Union of India completely. Now there are a lot of arguments in favor and against of the same. The current ruling government feels that the people of Jammu and Kashmir will get more rights, will be subjected to more avenues than they were earlier. But this abrogation has not been that easy. The government has claimed it to be a correction of what Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru had done in the past. But the current scenario which we are seeing is nothing which is even close to normal. The abrogation of special status of Jammu and Kashmir has led to a lot of unrest in the state. Now, because of this abrogation, a lot of things have happened. Number one, to curtail the insurgent movements or attacks or fake news or incitement of anti-sentiment against these governments or the rulers of the whole land. It was well thought by the government of India that we should suspend the internet connection, because that is a major role. It plays a major role in terrorism. It plays a major role in conducting far-fetched events. It plays a major role for buying weapons from dark web. These were a few arguments which were raised in the case laws, which I'm going to refer now. So, by virtue of abrogation, from 6th, the abrogation took place on 5th of August, and from 6th of August, Ms. Anuradha Bhasin, who was the editor of Kashmir Times, the Srinagar edition, was perplexed. She approached the Supreme Court for cancellation of all the orders which have been passed regarding suspension of internet and to restore the position. So now we'll be dealing with Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India, which was filed in the Supreme Court, which lays down and tells us whether any fundamental rights of the people have been violated or not, subject to the infringement of their right to use of internet. Whether completely stopping internet would lead to any violation of fundamental rights. Let's see what Anuradha Bhasin has to say. So the facts of the case was that Anuradha Bhasin was, as I told you, she was the editor of the Kashmir Times in Srinagar, and she contested that internet is absolutely essential for print media, and that she has not been able to circulate the paper since 6th of August, that is the next day after the abrogation. Further, she contended that the order of suspension was passed on an apprehension of likelihood of danger of the law and order situation in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. She said that the balancing measures are necessary to maintain national security and curbing terrorism within the limits of that state. She further said that the restrictions imposed were supposed to be temporary, but have been going on for 100 days, and still no check has been made to them. She went on to say that it is against the National Telecom Policy of 2012 to suspend internet services for an indefinite period of time. She further claimed that there exists neither internal or external aggression, hence the order needs to be rechecked. So let's see what the states argue here. These were her general arguments in the court while challenging the order for suspension of internet in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And the state, on the other hand, argued on the very basic points, that is the test of proportionality and reasonableness. It stated that terrorism is extreme and majorly unidentified as to from where the attacks are, when do they happen. So in order to curb such happenings, internet needs to go off. Further, they went on to say that the preventing measures to know cross-border terrorism and internal militancy needs to be done. And if they don't do it at this moment, the state of Jammu and Kashmir will be in complete mess. Fourth, they went on to say that 144 under CRPC was imposed for the public welfare. And last, they went on to say that the internet can be used to circulate fake news and incite violence between the people of the state. And that dark web is something which is beyond their control. And dark web is used to purchase weapons. The Solicitor General also argued that it is practically impossible to bring down specific sites, websites, and so a complete blanket ban is necessary. This argument of Solicitor General was extremely thrashed down by the Supreme Court and was heavily taken upon. Now, there were very major issues which were raised in this case. First was whether the freedom of speech and expression or to practice trade and profession over the internet is a part of fundamental right. Next, the court went on to say that freedom of expression through the internet is one of the integral parts of Article 19(1)(a), and internet is a major source to it. Further, court said that there are restrictions, but they are subject to the test of proportionality. Here, I would like to tell you that if at all fundamental rights have been violated through such internet shutdown, what could they possibly be? Internet today is a major source of mostly all the information. It is the source of our development, of our work, source for money. So, by curtailing internet services in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the whole system has crumbled to an extent. Of course, Article 19 guarantees certain fundamental rights, and this Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir does not have any Part 3 in itself, which means that they have directly adopted Part 3 of our Constitution as their Constitution, and so it applies verbatim to them. So Article 19(1)(a) suggests freedom of speech and expression, which means to have your own views, which means the press can say whatever they want to. It has now went on to include conversations in it. Second is to freedom to association. You can form associations for your good, for the purpose of your work. Third is the freedom to move freely around any part of the country. Fourth is the freedom to reside and settle in any part of the country. Fifth is the freedom to trade and practice any profession of your choice. And last, but not explicitly, is your right to know. So by such curtailment of internet, Article 19 has been violated to a lot of extent. Freedom of speech has gone to the drains. While AFSPA has been implemented, there is complete military rule. So people cannot form associations owing to 144 CRPC. Of course, people are not allowed to move freely. Internet is gone. They cannot practice their trade and profession on the internet. And the speed coming out, I will deal with the speed part later. Some of you might come with the argument that they have this 2G connection, internet is not completely gone. I will come to that later. So yes, if the internet speed is really slow and you want to do certain transactions on internet, you cannot. So freedom of trade and profession is also gone to an utmost extent. And coming down to Article 21, right to life and live with personal liberty and dignity has also been violated. To have a dignified life in a democracy, one needs to enjoy certain liberties. One needs to have a right to know its government and the activities of the government in order to vote with complete information and a sound manner, because the subjects of the country have the right to choose who should be their leader. That is through universal adult franchise. So Article 21 has also been sabotaged to much of extent. Now there lies certain exceptions, or they call it reasonable restrictions, by which it has been justified. Such curtailment of fundamental rights have been justified and have always stood in the Supreme Court due to the test of reasonable restriction. In Anuradha Bhasin as well, the Supreme Court has said time and again that such restrictions are allowed subject to the test of proportionality and the test of reasonable restrictions. Now, let's know the reasonable restrictions which fall under the ambit of freedom of speech and expression. So, when can your freedom of speech and expression be curtailed? When there is any issue of sovereignty or integrity of the state, further, issues relating to security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, defamation, contempt of court, and incitement to an offense. So, except defamation and contempt to court, all these reasonable restrictions are valid in the case of Jammu and Kashmir. The situation, the political scenario, the scenario in the Jammu and Kashmir is so-called unique in nature because of its geopolitical positioning and the claim over it by the neighboring states. It is well spoken of and well documented that if the state of Jammu and Kashmir is left as it is without any hindrances, it will cause havoc. How? The recent incident where a terrorist was killed and around 500 people went to attend his funeral gives reason enough to the state, to the government of India to impose such rules. He was a celebrated terrorist of Jaish-e-Mohammed, and this incident had drastically disturbed the conscience of the government of India. Further, there are many arguments in support of internet ban in Jammu and Kashmir. It is further said that the right to access the internet is not a fundamental right, and thus the type and breadth of access for exercising the right to freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a, or to carry on any trade or business under Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution of India through the medium of internet can be curtailed. The restoration of 4G mobile data services will substantially increase the use of social media and other online platforms in uploading, downloading the videos and other propaganda material and their fast circulation, which in result would deteriorate the law and order situation in the Kashmir Valley. Further, I have cited examples of the Jaish-e-Mohammed incident, and it is further spoken of that the advisory steps taken against the misuse of the mobile data services, which are prevalent in other parts of the country, may not be practical and definitely not sufficient for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. These have been certain arguments in favor of the internet ban. But my argument, or the argument of many others, against such blanket ban for an indefinite period revolves around the fact that such unrest and such geopolitical scenario, such military scenarios, internal insurgencies have always been persistent in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It was there in the early 90s. It is now. It might remain in future. I'm saying it might remain in future because China has recently tried to infiltrate the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Under one road, one belt system, the China is trying to create a road in Jammu and Kashmir. So even in most fortunate circumstances, both the armies of India and Pakistan withdraw themselves from the borders of the state, the China will still continue to remain there. So is the government suggesting an indefinite blank forever, indefinite internet blackout forever? What is the action plan is the question. Such situations have always remained in the state and might continue to remain, and there has become no solution. And to condemn it or to control this situation, the abrogation of Article 370 was done and special status was removed in order to bring the state of Jammu and Kashmir to the part of, to an intrinsic part of India. It is further also argued that the people of Jammu and Kashmir have lost their rights which existed with them before the abrogation of Article 370. So in the garb of government giving them more rights, they have taken whatever little they had. This is the current geopolitical, social, economic scenario in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. As far as the fundamental rights are concerned, to live with dignity, you need to participate in the democratic process. And to participate in the democratic process, you need to remain well versed and informed. The best mode of information, the speediest mode is internet. And by taking away internet, you take away the right to know, the right to education, the right to life, and the right to livelihood as well in this scenario to Jammu and Kashmir. The current trying times of COVID-19 has taken India to another level of digitization. All classes are being conducted online. I have friends who are faculties who have been telling me that some of the students from Jammu and Kashmir have not been able to attend classes because of poor internet connection. So therefore, we can safely assume that right to education is being hampered. Further, it's not only by this mode, but your right to know the actions of the ruling government was nowhere concerned while giving such a robust and inflammatory decision by the state of by the Union of India through his presidential order. Moving on, I would like to discuss Fahima Shireen case, which further extended the whole scenario and related the internet to right to privacy as well. So the title of the case is Fahima Shireen versus State of Kerala. Fahima Shireen was a student in a university and was living in a hostel. While she was living in a hostel, there were hostel rules that you could use your telephone or your mobile phones for a certain period of time. That is, earlier it was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Later they converted it to 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. That is only for 4 hours. With this new change in the rule, Ms. Fahima Shireen got drastically upset and asked the warden to reconsider this rule. Since the warden did not do anything about it and no meeting were conducted, she directly wrote a letter to the principal or the dean of the university asking, asking her to change the rules. The dean understood by such a letter that she does not or want to abide with those rules and directly expelled her from the hostel. While she was expelled, she wrote a letter to the college administration informing them that she would not be able to attend the classes because she stays 150 kilometers away from the campus. So this was the brief facts of the case, and a writ regarding the same was filed in the court in Kerala. Now there were certain issues raised in this case. Whether the restrictions imposed by the hostel authorities to enforce discipline has infringed fundamental rights of the petitioner. Second, whether such infringement would curtail the right to gain knowledge of the inmates of that hostel. The arguments by the petitioner was that e-portals, e-books, courses under SWAYAM, which is recognized by UGC, are available only on internet. These courses are very valuable and knowledgeable, and they need to know and have access to such things. Further, they went on to say that students are adults because, of course, they are over the age of 18, and they have the right and full capacity to make decisions for themselves. Next, they went on to say that the misuse of phone can happen anytime, even in those permitted time. And therefore, the whole idea or the regulation or the rule made was highly impractical. Next, the regulation or the rule stated that only the mobile phones are forbidden, but the laptops are allowed. Keeping that in mind, even today, we do not have economic equality, as we are well aware. And so, the laptop was something which was not accessible to everyone. And the disparity remained. These were certain arguments raised by the petitioner. Whereas the state of Kerala went on to say the whole idea behind such regulation was that the study time of the individuals should be used for the purpose of study only and not for anything else. So in order to stop them from doing anything else or being engaged in the phone, giving the examples of the millennials in the current time who are more or less invested in phones, both emotionally and physically. So this was the premise for such rules and regulations. The court went on to say that the right to access the internet is a part of right to privacy under Article 21, along with the right to education. The UN General Assembly had declared right to internet to be a human right in 2014. And the only restriction is that the students should not cause disturbance to other fellow students. This was the outcome of this petition, whereas the right to use internet was also extended to the right to privacy. But here let me tell you, right to internet is not an absolute right, because still not the complete population of Union of India does not have access to it. It will so happen when the complete population has access to it at the same level with same instruments, and only then can it be a absolute right for all of us here. So this has been the current situations going on in Jammu and Kashmir, in the state of India, the Union of India, and the impact on the fundamental rights, which has taken its views. The protests are going on, and they will be on forever. But the government has to take a call. Now, because of all these happenings, the international reputation of India has gone down. At the time of the Treaty of Accession, the Union of India had committed certain things to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. But by the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, such commitment has gone to the waves, and this has been internationally recognized. People of the state of Jammu and Kashmir are drastically aggrieved and do not now want to relate themselves with the Union of India. This sentiment has prevailed greatly, which is sad for all of us. Because the state of Jammu and Kashmir, as they say, is the crown of India, and we all believe the same, and we want it to be true. The ICCPR commitment made by India on the international level has been violated by abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, which has left uh, an impression of dominance, an impression of being an arrogant government which does not like to listen to its subjects. So here we have mildly failed. We have not been able to rule it in a certain manner which could have been done. Like the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government came out with the slogan, Kashmiriyat, Jamhuriyat, and one thing more, which I've forgotten. So it was the Atal Bihari government which completely eased down the relation between India and between Jammu and Kashmir and other parts of India, and tried to neutralize it as much as it could. And the following governments could not follow up with the idea of Mr. Bajpayee. And today, we are in a state of constant turbulence in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which might exist for we don't know how long. And we all can just hope and pray that things in the valley calm down soon and the people are relieved and can live a life of normalcy and decency. As of now, they are all almost in house arrest. They can't move out of their houses without ID cards. They are being, if people are caught without ID cards, they are being sent to prisons, which is extreme law violation of Article 21 without any specific grounds. And such violations are continuing time and again. So I hope I have addressed the issue of the internet shutdown and the fundamental rights violation. And I have also tried to give you a historical background of the state of Jammu and Kashmir so that you can relate it to the current scenarios going on in that state. If you have any questions, you may please put it up in the chat box and I'm here to answer them. Nancy, over to you.
If we have any questions from any of our participants, please feel free to drop them into the chat box.
I think everyone is satisfied.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing very useful and informative insights on this important topic. I personally apologize to you on behalf of our participants for all the inconvenience and disturbance caused, if any. I thank all our participants for attending the webinar till the end. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. We can end the session now.
Thank you, Nancy, for hosting this webinar and inviting me to the event. And it was very well conducted. You conducted it in a decent manner. And I'm always open to any queries if you people feel like, if you come across any queries later, you are free to shoot email to Law Mentor and maybe they can let me know. Thank you,
Sure.
everyone.
Thank you so much.